They say every child deserves a parent. They rarely ask if every parent deserves a child. On an ordinary August morning in a small Louisiana town, a house sat strangely quiet. A car in the driveway, a dog that did not bark, curtains drawn against a bruised gray sky. When a neighbor knocked, no footsteps came to meet her, no quick shuffle of little feet, no mother's answer. Only a hush so heavy it felt deliberate, like a held breath. Inside that quiet house, the story of Amy Hebert was about to become a scar on the community that would never fully fade. Welcome to Fractured Files, where we examine the cases that fracture families, haunt towns, and refuse to let go. We look for the truth that survives the noise, and what that truth says about all of us. Now, let's go back. Before the sirens, before the headlines, before the silence. Before she was Amy Hebert, she was Amy Talbot. She married her high school boyfriend, Chad Hebert, on a hot August day in 1991. He was steady, she was warm. Church on Sundays, LSU on TV, small-town Louisiana where people wave with their whole body, not just a finger lifted from a steering wheel. In 1994, they moved to Mathews, a community stitched together by two-lane roads, family names, and the kind of memory that never really fades. Their first child, a daughter, arrived in June of 1998. They named her Camille Catherine. A second child, a son, came in May of 2000. He was Braxton John, a little boy who'd line up his toy cars the same way every time, who loved routine and sun-warm water. He had a mild form of autism, sometimes described back then as being on the Asperger's end of the spectrum. He was bright and literal, affectionate in his own rhythms. Amy worked as a teacher's aide at the local elementary school. People used words like kind and patient. She was faithful. She was involved. Friends said she was the mom who remembered your kid's birthday and the casserole dish. Chad, for his part, told people she was a natural with the children, a mom who seemed to know when to scold and when to go get popsicles. Camille, with a smile that showed all the work her braces were doing, decided at 8 that she'd grow her hair long enough to donate it to kids who'd lost theirs to illness. She had barely an inch to go. She wanted to do good, the way kids do, with a plan drawn in crayon and an earnest heart. By all appearances, they were fine. Not perfect. Nothing is, but fine. The crack began as so many do, quietly. The marriage frayed under the weight of disagreements that never quite resolved, needs that didn't match, conversations that burned hot and then went cold. In 2005, Amy and Chad separated. Amy held on to the idea that things could be repaired if they both tried. Chad didn't believe that anymore. Chad started seeing someone new, a woman named Kimberly Mendoza. To Chad, it was the second act of a life that had to move forward. To Amy, it was a wound that didn't scab. Hurt compounds when you feel like the past is erasing you in real time, like someone's painting over the lines you drew, replacing your family portrait with something that has no space for you. They shared custody of the children. It's a sentence that sounds simple on paper. In real life, it's school calendars, backpacks migrating between houses, and careful diplomacy at pickups. Kimberly's relationship with the kids grew warmer over months of cautious hellos and weekend outings. Camille took to her, as girls sometimes do with women who laugh at the right moments and let you pick nail polish. She even said she wanted to be a flower girl if her dad and Kimberly got married. That kind of innocence is sweet, and also a knife to a mother who's still bleeding. Meanwhile, Chad's parents, Buck and Judy, moved into a house across the street from Amy in 2007. Grandparents across the road, grandkids running back and forth. The ease of it. But proximity can also be pressure. When Judy encouraged the kids to keep building a healthy relationship with Kimberly, Amy heard the subtext her fear translated for her. You're being replaced. They're choosing. You're losing. None of that is necessarily true. Fear is a persuasive liar. The summer of 2007 felt like stale heat. Friends saw Amy's grief harden into something sharper. She lost weight. She prayed more. She fasted, she said, to cleanse herself of dark thoughts. A friend, seeing the fog around her, suggested music, a drive, anything to puncture the heaviness. Church friends prayed with her. They remember her looking past them, as if there was a thing over their shoulders she couldn't stop tracking. When it was Chad's turn with the kids, there were delays. Small ones, 10 minutes that turned into 40. A flat tire that was fine yesterday. A forgotten backpack that required doubling back. These are the little wars of custody, fought with clocks and excuses. Some of it is petty. Some of it is grief with nowhere to go. On Sunday, August 19th, Amy went to church. She didn't chat. She said to a friend, "I couldn't do it." Do what, exactly, no one knew. The sentence sounds different after you learn what happened the next day. At the time, it sounded like ordinary overwhelm, a mom stretched thin and weighed down by a summer that wouldn't end. August 20th, 2007. Monday morning started with a small decision everyone recognized. A coworker noticed Amy hadn't shown up at the elementary school. That was odd. She was consistent. They called. No answer. Someone drove by. Amy's car sat in the driveway. The dog didn't bark. The coworker called Chad to say something was off. Chad called 911 from his own workplace, concerns spiking into panic because, in a custody arrangement, you always live with the 2-second terror that shadows the words, "Something's wrong." Before first responders could arrive, Buck, the children's grandfather, walked from across the street. He forced his way in through a window into the utility room. He knew this home, knew the sound the fridge made. The familiarity made the next moments a betrayal. He saw blood. He reached the master bedroom. What he found there cannot be made gentle by language. He called the police and begged them to hurry. Officers arrived and forced entry. In the bedroom, a woman barely alive, covered in blood and clutching a knife, shouting at the officers to get out. They subdued her with a taser. Then the room quieted into the kind of silence that means a clock has stopped. 11 kitchen knives were collected from that bed, some bloodied, some bent from force. The family dog was dead. 2 children were rushed to the hospital. Medical examiners documented staggering numbers. Camille sustained more than 60 stab wounds. Roughly 30 were to the front of her torso, with injuries involving the heart, lungs, stomach, and other vital organs. She also had around 30 wounds to the scalp. The blade didn't penetrate the skull, but the pattern told its own story. On her arms, examiners noted defensive injuries, 5 on the left, 9 on the right. Braxton suffered more than 50 stab wounds. About 30 struck the front of his body, the remainder the back, with 1 injury piercing the heart. He, too, showed defensive wounds, 5 on the left arm and 2 on the right. Because many injuries overlapped and some cuts perforated through existing wounds, the autopsy could not determine a precise total. The counts remain more than, a measured way of saying it was far too many. Both children died from massive blood loss. Amy Hebert, their mother, survived. She had stabbed herself dozens of times. Doctors at the hospital counted wounds to her wrists, chest, neck, scalp, even eyelids, the painful, frantic marks of a person fighting a thing inside that doesn't fight back. There are sentences that change you just by saying them. This is one. Investigators found 2 handwritten notes. One was addressed to Chad. In it, Amy wrote that he had chosen a new life and that he would not take the children with him. She accused him of chasing money, spoke of insurance and plans for the house, and framed what happened as protection rather than loss. She wrote about pain and betrayal, about how the kids suffered, and about how she saw no life worth living in the future she imagined. It read like the logic of a cornered mind, the grammar of jealousy pretending to be justice. The second note addressed extended family. It blamed people who welcomed Chad's new partner, who carried the children across the street to spend time with Kimberly. It read as a ledger of grievances, lined up and underlined, ending with apologies to loved ones who would soon be devastated by what came next. The notes didn't mention demons. They didn't mention heaven. They didn't ask for mercy. They looked like motive written in Amy's own hand, a clear through line from fear of being replaced to the decision to end the children's lives. They read in the moment police collected them, like motive in ink. Amy was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors prepared a death penalty case. In Louisiana in 2007, this was not a theoretical threat. The community grieved. The children's schools held memorials. People left stuffed animals and sun-wilted flowers. Everyone wondered how a person who once led Sunday school crafts could cross into an act so barren of mercy. Amy's defense filed a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The argument was simple and also complicated. Amy's lawyer said that she wasn't sane at the time of the murders, that she had suffered a psychotic break, that she was hearing voices that she believed, in the distorted logic of her illness, that killing the children and herself was the only way to stop a worse fate. In that argument, she wasn't choosing evil. She was captive to it. In the days after the crime, a psychiatrist met with Amy and said she seemed to track something in the room, eyes following a presence no one else saw. Amy said Satan was there. She said he'd been whispering to her for a long time, urging her toward ruin, and that she'd been fighting back with prayer. On the morning of the murders, she said she lost the fight. Another expert interviewed her a year later and recorded a different frame. The voice, she said, was God's, waking her at 3 a.m., commanding her to protect the children from a father who would soon take them away, to make sure the family stayed together in death if it could no longer stay together in life. She said the voice told her to practice, to stab the mattress first. She said she went back and forth from the doorway, trying to resist until she didn't. There's a cruelty to these accounts that sits apart from law. They force us to imagine the space between hesitation and action, to picture a mother in a doorway, to hear a child say, "Mom, I love you. I don't want to die," and a mother reply with, "I love you," and then keep going. The courtroom later struggled with that sentence more than almost any piece of evidence because it sounds like clarity, not confusion. All the defense experts agreed on broad strokes. They said Amy was severely depressed. They said she was psychotic, that she hallucinated, that she lost the map that tells you right from wrong. They said she was suicidal and included the children in that plan under the delusion that it was salvation. The state brought its own experts. One psychiatrist agreed that Amy suffered from depression, even psychotic features, but testified that her condition didn't erase her ability to know right and wrong. He pointed to the notes. They were coherent. They were organized. They sounded like a person angry at an ex-husband and the woman he loved, a person who wanted to prevent the children from growing closer to that new family. The notes weren't the words of a mind describing visions. They were the words of a mind explaining revenge. Another expert focused on the hesitation. Amy admitted she paused before hurting the children because she didn't want to hurt them. That statement matters in court. It suggests an understanding of harm. It suggests an awareness of consequence. And awareness, the prosecution argued, is the opposite of insanity in the legal sense. They also noted that Amy had no prior documented history of psychosis. No earlier hospitalizations, no pattern of delusions, no medication. Yes, mental illness can bloom fast, but juries are often skeptical of sudden storms. Chad took the stand and said he never planned to take the children from their mother. He said he never threatened to do it. He spoke about his kids as parents do when grief has stripped them down to bone. He said he wakes up every day to the same empty room. 2 weeks after the trial began, the jury returned a verdict. Amy Hebert was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The jurors did not unanimously choose the death penalty. Without unanimity, death was off the table. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 life sentences that run like parallel rails no train will ever finish. In court, voices rose in mourning. Chad said they were his angels, that he laughs sometimes recalling their small quirks. And then, the laugh slides into a cry he can't stop. Judy, the grandmother, said grandchildren are a blessing, that her heart now has a hole that can't be filled. Amy's father, stunned and disbelieving, said he wanted to take his daughter home, said she wasn't this person. The room held all of those truths, and none of them could change the other. Amy remains incarcerated, serving her sentences at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. Appeals have been filed and denied. In 2008, before the verdict, Chad married Kimberly. Some people will feel something catch at that timeline. Grief and love don't always wait for the paperwork. The community continued to mourn the children in the only ways left to them. A memorial fund in Camille and Braxton's names began to build recreational spaces for kids at their old schools, places of sun and motion, because the only answer to a silence like this is laughter echoing across a playground. True crime usually wants a clean answer. It wants a culprit who is easy to hate, a motive that makes narrative sense, and a lesson we can fold and put in our pocket. This case refuses all of that. Here, the murderer is a mother who by many accounts was loving and gentle until she wasn't. The motive is a tangle of loss, jealousy, fear, and an inner voice no one else heard. The lesson is ugly. You can pray, you can volunteer at school, you can make your children pancakes, and still fall off a cliff in a single night if the storm in your mind convinces you there's no road left. So what do we do with that? Maybe this. If you're sitting in a dark room and your thoughts whisper about impossible choices, tell someone out loud. If you're watching a friend shrink into a quieter version of herself, ask the clumsy question. Be the person who says, "I'm worried," not because it will always work, because sometimes it will. If this story moved you, or if it made you think about mental health and custody, hit like. This is Fractured Files. If you're new here, subscribe to join a community that approaches true crime with care, context, and relentless curiosity. Like, comment, and I'll see you in the next one.